afternoon, everyone. It's like I see a lot of people from different countries also participating in this session. I'm really glad for that. And I request Dr. Sujata Malini ma'am to give the welcome address.
Thank you. I think Akshay Lakshmi.
Yes,
Am I correct?
yes,
Okay, thank you. Thank you for introducing. And on behalf of the Department of Special Education, Alagappa University and Department of Psychology, American College, we are so happy to start this 1 week international webinar on mental health and wellness during this COVID-19 pandemic. I hope this 1 week program will go on very smoothly. A lot of responses from various places. I'm so happy to receive all the responses, registration from different parts of India as well as from other countries also. At the outset, it is our, what to say, it is our very good opportunity given by our higher officials. So at this moment, I thank our Vice Chancellor and higher officials, registrar and other staff members for granting permission to conduct this international webinar on mental health and wellness. I, on behalf of the Department of Special Education, Alagappa University and Department of Psychology, American College, we wholeheartedly welcome our today's speaker, Dr. Hans Werner Jessman, Director at International Center for Clinical Psychology and Psychotherapy from Germany. It's our pleasure to welcome you, sir, with a very vast experience and knowledge in the field of psychology, clinical psychology and psychotherapy. I'm sure that you will be able to pass on your experience to all our participants so that they can meet out their problems and they can maintain their mental health and wellness, and they can fight against this COVID-19 and pandemic in a very effective manner. So in this regard, I also welcome our second speaker, who is going to be joining with us very soon, Kadiravan sir also, Professor Periyar University, for being with us and delivering his expertise to all our participants. At this juncture, I also welcome all the participants who are with us from various parts of India, Tamil Nadu, and from various parts of other countries also, to be with us for this 1 week session, which will be discussed on different aspects of mental health and wellness during this COVID-19 pandemic situation. I wholeheartedly welcome the coordinator or the organizing secretary of Department of Psychology, American College, Dr. Suresh sir, for being with us and helping and supporting us in all other ways for conducting this program in an effective manner. Thank you and welcome you once again, sir. I welcome each and everyone for this international webinar session. I welcome once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sujata Malini ma'am. Now I invite, thank you ma'am. Now I invite Dr. Suresh Kumar sir to introduce the speaker.
Very good evening, one and all. I think to introduce about our today's speaker, Professor Hans Werner, it takes another 30 minutes. His profile leads around 70 pages. So what I'm going to tell about the basic things about him, he is the pioneer in psychodrama, and he's a very nice person and more systematic in that field. When we approached him for this webinar, he consented, and then he would like to share his knowledge on topic. And in the morning itself, he is waiting for this session, and today he is going to share with us. Dear all, I'm going to share his profile in that Wikipedia. Just look into that. How many pages are there about him? I will share him that link. And you can amaze that the profile of Professor Hans Werner, and he is a director of the association. See the pages in Wikipedia alone, you can say how many pages it leads. And if you go to there are many awards, many publications, he is a I can say that he's one of the living legend in the field of psychodrama and psychology. And we are blessed to have his session today, sir. On behalf of the Alagappa University, on behalf of the American College, on behalf of the participants over here, I welcome you for today's webinar session. Please take over the session and share your knowledge, sir.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Hans, please, you can proceed with your presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Vielen Dank. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Nice to see you. So,
Nice to see you, sir.
Good morning to all participants. We have midday today here in Germany. And today I would like to talk about Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was an American psychologist, and he is the founder of the client-centered therapy. I want to introduce his personality, his development, and main points of his theory. So, and I would use a PowerPoint presentation for it, because last time I had problems with the language, Indian accent. I could not understand well, so I thought it is better to write it. So, but now I don't know how to start. Is it possible to click? Do you present it, or do I do it myself?
Professor, I will present for you from here. Professor,
Okay.
yeah, I
Can
will
you-
present for you here. Yes. Can you able to see the screen now?
Yeah. So I need to find my presentation. One moment, please.
Sure, sir. Dr. Hans?
Yes, I'm looking for the right presentation, because you saw the tables, but I need to get the text to the tables. Mhm.
Professor, can you able to see the screen?
So I have the problem that I don't get my text.
Okay. Oh,
If I switch to the presentation, the text.
Dr. Suresh Kumar sir will support you with the presentation slides, sir. You can proceed with your presentation. Can you see the PPT, sir? Is it visible on your screen?
If I click to the presentation like this, you can see it, but I cannot see my text.
okay. Then, Professor, you can share from your screen itself. I'll stop from here. And there is a button called Share Screen is there in your screen. You can just click that and open your PPT. It will be visible to all. In the down corner, you can see the green color, share screen.
Yeah.
Yes, share screen. Open your PPT, Professor, and then share screen, it will be there. You can see the text also.
That's a presentation of the screen.
Yes, yes, Professor.
You can see, but my text is off. My presentation text is off. It is written under the.
Okay, okay.
So I try to open it for a second time.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Professor, you can use the text from your side. I will. Can I present PPT from here?
Is it okay if Suresh Kumar sir shows the PPT? Is it okay, sir?
No, he is having the text for that PPT. Professor, you can open the text in your screen. I will do one thing. I will share the screen from here. Is it okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Professor. I will share the PPT from here. You can open the text from in your computer. You can start presenting.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, Professor. I will do the screen sharing from
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. You can proceed, Professor. I will take care of that.
Yeah. So next one. Yes, I would like to talk about Carl Rogers, his origin and development of his therapy. Sometimes it is called talk therapy, sometimes you name it conversation therapy. And I would like to talk about his career as founder of this special psychotherapy. Next. You go on.
Next slide, sir.
Next slide. Next, please.
Yes.
So Carl Rogers was born in 1902. He grew up in a puritanically conservative family that fed on agriculture. In the close family union, hard work was done. Religious ethical beliefs determined thinking and acting. Parents and children treated each other in a distant manner. You only spoke when it was necessary and certainly not about feelings. Next. In his article, Development and Current State of My Views on Interpersonal Relationships in 1983, Rogers describes in detail how his development began in his parental home how he felt about his loneliness and social isolation within the family as he grew up. And during his life became aware of the entire training period and how he can overcome the loneliness and make important learning experiences that he can later use in his personal and professional life. Next. In the same way, Rogers made intensive use of important stages in his life and training to gain experiences about himself and about interpersonal relationships. He developed his beliefs in dealing with other people in a meaningful way. In friendship and marriage, he learned that a deep exchange with others is not only possible, but even enriching. He realized that it is important to speak about the elements of relationship that are kept secret, that are troubling or unsatisfactory. After studying agriculture, later studying theology, he came to clinical psychologist. Yes. Rogers was particularly interested in the practical clinical work, in educational counseling. He tried to gain as much knowledge about the clients as possible. The way he acted was rather cool and distant, as he knew from his parents' house. In dealing with psychoanalysis, he learned more about the individual, his childhood, various degrees of dependence on people in his environment, sophisticated tests, long reports, and thorough diagnostic interviews should serve the goal of getting to know and treating clients better. During his studies, Rogers was impressed by the warm and sympathetic behavior of a professor who impressed him more with her personality than with her lectures, without it being possible to derive consequences for his behavior in dealing with clients. He began his work as a member of the Department of Child Research in Rochester, New York. From his failures, some clients did not want to agree with his diagnostics and advice. Some simply stayed away. Rogers learned to question his distance, to realize, listen to the client, and to trust his own way. Sigmund Freud's student Otto Rank encouraged him to include the client's ability in therapy to find his own solutions in his problems. Next. Some of the experiences from the period were decisive for Rogers' later work. Dominant and authoritarian behaviors in dealing with clients have at most short-term and superficial effects. The client knows best what is bothering him, what conflicts he has, and in which direction he wants to go. Next. Rogers became a professor at Ohio State University. Here, he has developed his person-centered conversation psychotherapy, which clearly stood out against direct counseling and psychoanalytic treatment, and presented it to the public in his book, Counseling and Psychotherapy in 1942. Supplemented by the verbatim transcript of a complete one-taped psychotherapy that it was very new at that time. At the University of Chicago, he tried to formulate his new attitude towards interpersonal relationships and to act accordingly when dealing with students and staff. At the same time, he checked his hypothesis by intensifying the therapy research that had already started. In 1952, his book, Client-Centered Therapy, was published, in which he described his therapeutic approach, the philosophical basic, empirical studies, and the personality theory in detail. Next. 1954 and 1967 were followed by studies on the processes and effects of person-centered conversation psychotherapy. Rogers later extended his concepts to groups, on-encounter groups in 1970, and to the education, Freedom to Learn in 1969. He formulates the personal learning experiences that he gradually gained and that determined his behavior as a therapist. In my experience with people, I found that acting in the long run does not help, as if I'm someone I'm not. Next. It is more effective when I listen to myself, accepting, and when I can be myself. It is of great value to me if I can allow myself to understand another person. It is enriching to open channels through which others can communicate their feelings, their privately perceived world to me. It is extremely satisfying to accept another person. That was in 1961. The concept of conversation psychotherapy by Rogers started in 1940 and was published in 1942 with his book Counseling and Psychotherapy. The attached tape record of a therapy session was the first sensational attempt in the history of clinical psychotherapy using the methods of empirical psychological research was transparent in the further development of conversation therapy. Theoretical systems were continuously derived from the phenomena observed in psychotherapeutic processes, which in turn were verified by empirical research. The development of theoretical considerations and their empirical verification were understood as a necessary, mutually corrective process. The development can be described in three phases, but which, although to a different extent, consistently show similarities that describe the therapeutic concept as a whole. Next. Similarities that describe the therapeutic concept. Basically, everyone has the ability to independently develop their personality, behavior, and experience. Given the right conditions, for example, in therapy or other good interpersonal relationships towards maturation and self-fulfillment. The therapeutic situation must be largely fear-free and safe for the client. The therapist's communication style should be such that it enables the client to think about himself. Deep self-exploration is the next, and self-reflection about his behavior and experience. The next. The therapeutic situation should be as real as possible and interpersonal. That is, interpersonal encounter, in which the therapist meets the client in a genuine, warm, and sensitive way. The therapist should also express the client's own experience of the therapeutic situation and his own personal self-awareness in a sensitive, open manner. The non-directive phase was the first phase of this development of this therapy. It was estimated between 1940 and 1950. The main goal of the therapeutic work here is to create a permissive, fear-free atmosphere in which the client, free of dirigistic therapeutic approach, comes to an understanding of himself in order to correctly assess his problems and to be able to try to solve them himself. The therapist deliberately refrains from giving advice and instructions, which Rogers used to differentiate himself from the then usual therapeutic processes, but accepts the expressed feelings of the client, endeavors to warmly and empathetically grasp emotional contents of the utterances and to reflect them back with as little interpretation as possible. Next is the client-centered phase, the second phase. Just like the first section of conversation therapy by the first book, Rogers, the second section to introduce by his second book, Client-Centered Therapy, in 1951. It lies between 1950 and 1967 and is overlapped by the third phase from around 1957. The emphasis of here is no longer so much on the therapist, his cognitive clarification and insight into the problem situation of the client, but now the focus is on the subjective world of the client, which needs to be perceived. The understanding gained through empathy is convened to the client, whereby the valuation-free reflection of feelings and the warm and genuine effort of the therapist should initiate a process in which the client reorganizes himself. At the same time, a personality theory is developed. Empirical research is being pursued to demonstrate and verify the effectiveness of talk therapy. Next, the focus on the investigations is the behavior and change of the client. The key term is self-concept. According to Rogers, it is the job of the therapist to help the client to review and change the self-concept, which may be frozen so that he is able to perceive and integrate meaningful experiences undistorted. Next. The behavior of the therapist towards his client is particularly described by 3 variables. First, human, genuine, non-facade reaction of the therapist in conversation with the client. Warm-hearted, unconditional acceptance of the client's person. Compassionate understanding of the client's world of experience and the most precise verbalization of his emotional experience. These basic variables have been thoroughly examined using estimation scales and can be empirically verified as basic psychotherapeutic behaviors. In Germany at that time, Rogers' results were taken up primarily by Tausch, Reinhard Tausch, the professor in Hamburg, further theoretically worked out and used in therapy. In the meantime, the therapist's client-centered attitudes have been recognized not only in clinical therapy, but also in other areas of human coexistence as valid and beneficial. Next. The next phase, third phase, the person-centered phase. It extends from around 1957 to the present day. Here, the emphasis is clearly placed on the relationship and the ongoing process between therapist and client. The 3 significant therapist variables of empathy, warmth, and genuineness, first described by Roger in 1957, are increasingly seen as necessary basic conditions and are expanded by a variety of therapeutic approaches in addition to empirical research into therapeutic processes is increasingly becoming the focus of interest. Therapeutic phenomena are examined, hypotheses are established and tested, which are no longer obtained only in one-to-one interviews, but increasingly in self-awareness groups, family and group therapies, drug addicts, alcoholics, and psychotics. That defines more precisely what the variables warmth and authenticity can mean in individual cases and how they are filled with context. In therapy, the crucial question remains whether it is possible for the interlocutor to no longer the client to get closer to his inner experience in the intensive interpersonal encounter, to open himself and to deal with himself. Next. Basically, the gradually emerging and verified hypothesis is confirmed that the individual had tremendous potential in himself for self-knowledge and for changing his self-concept, his attitudes and his self-determined behavior, and that this potential can be released if only he succeeds to create a climate of beneficial psychological attitude to be defined. The therapist no longer only reflects feelings expressed, but also brings in himself. Therapy becomes a therapist and client comprehensive process of self-awareness. Rogers' theoretical considerations on conservation psychotherapy. Rogers' theoretical ideas essentially relate to three thematic groups: structure and development of the personality, the healthy and the disturbed personality, the reintegration of the disturbed personality. Next, thoughts on personal development. Rogers' conceptual system for considering personality is not a static one, but consciously exposes its constant development. Rogers is an advocate of this thesis. Therapy must grow out of therapy and practice, must question it. The therapy concepts are strongly influenced by his personal experience. For this time being, he summarized his view of personality in 1951 in client-related conversation psychotherapy. Roger 1951 in 19 theses. Rogers started from the idea of a special ideal way of life that is naturally good, positive, realistic, trustworthy, free. The pre-developed person does not experience himself as an object to which things happen from the outside or from the inner experience, but dirty mind determines himself. Rogers' conceptual system for considering personality is not a static one. I think I told that already. The first theoretical construction was the update trend, self-actualization, very often called. The basic motive in Rogers' image of man included the natural urge of the human organism to grow, to develop towards self-realization. That is, at Rogers, towards interdependence and self-responsibility. People's self-esteem rises when people can realize their desire for self-respect and social recognition. As soon as attempts are made to raise awareness of denied experiences, people feel threatened, develop fear and defense because they have to fear that their self-esteem and value system will be shaken by the discrepancy between their self-concept and those previously denied experiences becomes conscious. If the job of the therapist is create conditions under which the client's fear and defensive attitudes are weakened so that the client can establish a correspondence between himself and his fears. In personal development, Rogers in 1973 and Learning in Freedom 10 years later Rogers introduces a hypothetical person. The experience that the man has through his senses is a reality for him, even if it is not all accessible to his conscious. The image that people make of themselves and evaluate based on their experiences in their self-concept. New experiences that do not correspond with the self-concept are denied before consciousness. That is, at Rogers, not symbolized. A true, fully functioning person is the one who is open to all experiences, does not adopt a defensive distance, respects himself, and always makes and integrates new experiences. The necessary and sufficient conditions for the therapeutic process. In 57, Rogers described the necessary and sufficient conditions for personality change through psychotherapy. Two people, client and therapist, are in contact with each other. The client is in a state of vulnerability. His experience and feeling to do correspond to his self-image. If he is not aware of the disagreement with himself, incongruity, he is in a fearful state of tension. The therapist, as far as possible, accepts the client unconditionally, regardless of what he does, thinks, says, or feels. This condition can be considered fulfilled if the client feels encouraged to take care of their own experience without worrying about losing the therapist's attention. The therapist gets to know the inner frame of reference of the client through empathy and shares his experiences. The client at least begins to notice the positive attention and the communication of what the therapist has understood. Next. Here, the interaction character of the therapy becomes clear, which at least presupposes the approach of a relationship between client and therapist. A therapeutical effective relationship has developed when the therapist is empathetic, congruent, and appreciative, and the client can perceive and accept this relationship offer. Next, in psychotherapy, they are sometimes named differently. At Rogers, they are called Empathic Understanding, Empathy, Unconditional Acceptance and Appreciation of the Client, Authenticity of the Therapist. They are considered the most important features in the relationship between therapist and client. At Rogers as necessary and sufficient to change your personality. Next. Rogers defines empathic understanding as follows. It means entering the personal perception world of another and being completely at home in it. At every moment, it includes sensitivity to the changing emotional meanings that flow in this other person for fear or anger, tenderness or confusion or whatever experience he or she is experiencing. It means living temporarily in his/her life, moving cautiously and without judgment in the emotional meaning that she is barely aware of, but without trying to uncover feelings that the other person is completely unconscious of, because that would be too threatening, facing others fearfully, impartially, and fearlessly. It means with him/her the accuracy of the truth to check the helper's response and to be guided by the answers received. The helper is a trusting companion for the other in his/her world by showing the emotional meanings in the stream of his/her experience. He helps the other person to take up this value relationship with the inner experience, to experience the emotional meanings more experience-wise, and to advise to experience. Next.
I am very fortunate, and the client is very fortunate, if I can feel I really accept you fully just as you are. Sometimes that's very difficult. I held an interview with a young man in South Africa. I didn't know anything about him. It turned out he was an officer in the South African Army. Now, for me, that
Professor, unmute yourself.
So next one, please.
Yes.
To be with another person in this way means that during this time the helper puts aside the views and values that he holds himself in order to enter the other person's world of experience without prejudged. In a sense, this means that the helper resets himself. This can only be done by someone who is stable enough in himself to know that he will not lose himself in the other's world of experience, which can turn out to be strange or bizarre, and that he can leave it when he wants. Empathy means to comprehend the experience of the other as completely and exactly as if it were your own, and to communicate the perceived to the client. Empathic understanding is the function of promoting self-exploring and self-empathy of the client. Next. Rogers defines unconditional acceptance and appreciation of the client. Tausch called it caution, warmth, concern, as follows. I assume that personal growth and change occur more in a person the more the psychotherapist and counselor feels warm, positive, experiencing self-accepting attitudes towards what is going on in the client, which means that he respects his clients as a person, with the same emotional qualities that parents feel towards his child when he respects him as a person independently of how things are at that moment, which means that the psychotherapist is caring for his client in a non-possessive way as a person with development opportunities, including an open willingness to accept the client. However he feels, the moment may be hostile or loving, rebelling or submitting, self-confident or self-contempt. Next. It means feeling a kind of love for the client as he is, provided we understand the word love in the theological term, agape, and not in the usual romantic and possessive sense. What I'm describing here is a feeling that is neither patricial, nor sentimental, nor superficially amiable. I respect other people as an independent individual and does not take possession of them. It is a kind of affection which has a certain strength and intensity, but which does not demand. We call it respect for one person. An essential part of unconditional appreciation is that the therapist approaches the client as free of pre-trusted as possible. He has to put aside his own points of view and evaluations. Rogers formulates a connection between the empathic understanding and unconditional appreciation of the therapist. Both characteristics are aspects of the relationship between therapist and client. The degree of unconditional appreciation that the therapist feels is a criterion for the extent to which he is able to respond empathetically to his clients. Appreciation is only therapeutically effective if it is accompanied by understanding. He has to know what he values unconditionally. The therapist has to see his relationship offer from the point of view of an interaction. For example, also, it is likely effect on the client. For example, it can initially be a matter of self-control and need not yet be communicated to the client, who may not be able to stand the appreciation expressed, since it cannot be reconciled with his negative self-concept. Rogers described the therapist's variable congruence in the relationship between therapist and clients as follows. First of all, I assume that personality growth is promoted when the therapist is what he is in his relationship with the client, without drawing boundaries or facades. If he can stand by his feelings and attitudes that currently determine him. We have used the term congruence to describe this condition. We mean that the feelings that determine the therapist help him be available to make them aware that he is able to live them in relationship, and then he is able to communicate them when appropriate, which means that he will meet his clients directly in person, can encounter, so that a whole person meets a whole person. That means that he is himself, not denying himself. Nobody reaches this state completely yet. The more the therapist can accept what he perceives when he listens to himself, and the more he can live his feelings in all their complexity without fear, the greater degree of congruence. Next. On the one hand, being congruent means that the therapist can become aware of his emotional reactions to the client at any time and use it to understand the client. On the other hand, that the client is confident in the therapist, can dispense with doubts about the person, and is completely open, defensive, and honest in his own life. We are coming to the end. Conversational psychotherapy is an interaction event and specific relationship offer to the therapist, to the client. The therapist tries to establish a relationship with the client in which he can be highly empathetic, appreciative, and congruent. Appreciation and congruence are not human qualities, but therapist variables with specific functions. They are a prerequisite for the effectiveness of empathy. Empathy and congruency influence the therapist's ability to appreciative. The therapist's variables have no immediate effect other than changing the client's relationship with himself. In process research, process features are examined, that is, variables in the behavior of therapists and clients, as well as features of the interaction between them. The question of which variables can change the behavior and experience of the client is of particular interest. In other words, how the therapist has to behave and which behavioral characteristics of the client have to be present or promoted in order to achieve constructive changes in the client. So I thank you very much for your attention. It was a long lecture.
It's here.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Hans. And
Yes.
we have like few of them really want to ask you questions. I will just call upon them.
Yeah.
And I will give instruction for the participants.
No, Akshay,
Please be, yes, sir.
am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Question and answer, we will take it in a chat box for Hans Werner session.
That will be better.
And for Kadravan's, after Kadravan's session, we will take the questions from the participants.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay, you can give the feedback to SAR session, then I will find out the next resource.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, sir. Dr. Hans, this is the second session that I'm attending yours. It's a wonderful session, and last time we had some difficulties communicating. So you made sure that this time it should not happen, and I really appreciate your commitment to make sure that people are understanding what you're saying due to the language issues. Yes, thank you so much for that, and a wonderful presentation. And it was a holistic presentation about what Carl Rogers says and what it is all about. And thank you so much for joining us today. Please do wait for the question and answer session, and we will come back to you. Thank you so much, sir.
I thank you.
Yes, Ananya, everyone, sir. Ananya.
Thank you.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Hello, sir.
Yes, okay.
Yes, sir. I guess Ananya is not there. I will just invite.
Just a minute, Suresh.
Kadirun sir?
Suresh, check the PPT. You got the PPT.
Sir, I got it. It is there.
Okay. Suresh,